I'm Patricia Van Skyke, Executive Director of the Lloyd Library and Museum in Cincinnati, Ohio. I'd like to welcome you to today's program, Plants That Nourish and Heal, South Africa's Botanical Legacy in the African Plant Diaspora, with Dr. Shakira Shaik. The Lloyd Library recently curated an exhibition and symposium on the enduring impact of the African plant diaspora. The intersection of plants and health and wellness is foundational to the library's collections, programming, and mission. We see the impact of the African plant diaspora in both the Americas and in Africa. Today's program will explore the vital role of South African plants in food security and medicine. We'll hear about undervalued plants and crops used in primary health care and the impact of South Africa's botanical heritage on global agriculture and medicinal practices, based on Dr. Shaik's extensive research. Dr. Shakira Shaik is a plant biotechnologist with a Ph.D. from the University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa. She teaches plant biotechnology and scientific writing. Her research focuses on stress-tolerant crops and cryopreservation for endangered plants, with collaborations in Brazil and India. She has supervised numerous students, published 30 articles, and serves on editorial boards, including the European Journal of Horticultural Science. Dr. Shaik is also a grant reviewer and a member of several scientific organizations. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to Dr. Shakira Shaik. Hi, Shakira.
Hello. Hi, Patricia. Good morning, good day, or good evening, everyone, depending on where you are joining from. It is Saturday evening here in Durban, South Africa, and I'd like to begin by saying, don't be fooled by my name. I cannot sing or dance to save my life, and that is why I chose a life in academia. It is an honor to join you virtually for this powerful exhibition, The Enduring Impact of the African Plant Diaspora, and many thanks to the Lloyd Library and Museum for the kind invitation. Today, I invite you to journey with me across the southern tip of Africa as we explore the plants that have nourished and healed for generations and their legacy across the globe. I am by no means a historian, but I will try my best to share what I know. Here's a quick roadmap of what I will be covering: a glimpse into South Africa's heritage and some interesting facts about the country, its astonishing biodiversity, a closer look at plants used in food and medicine, some of my research, and finally, reflections on where we go from here. Let's begin by orienting ourselves geographically and culturally. When we talk of the southern tip of Africa, here is where we are referring. South Africa is 8,600 miles from Cincinnati and can fit into the United States 8 times. We comprise 9 provinces, as I hope you can see in this map. And in the next map, you can see that South Africa is a place of vivid contrast. We have deserts, we have mountains, and we have coasts. Despite our small size, our richness is in our people, cultures, and of course, our plants. Globally, we are known for several key things, and to name a few: game drives or safaris, as you would know in the US, biltong or jerky, braais or barbecues, our mining, and of course, rooibos tea, which I will be talking about a bit later. This slide also has a link to more interesting facts about South Africa. We are also known for some remarkable contributions to science and innovation. Some world firsts that originated here was the first heart transplant, the first CT scan, computerized ticketing, invention of the pool cleaning creepy crawly, and those weird geometric shapes one sees at harbors, called dolos. We've had 11 Nobel Prize winners, ranging from awards in peace to chemistry to medicine to literature. Max Theiler was awarded the prize for discovering yellow fever and how to combat it. Albert Luthuli and Desmond Tutu for their non-violent struggle against apartheid. Alan Cormack for the CT scan, Alan Klug for crystallography in electron microscopy, Nadine Gordimer and John Maxwell Coetzee for their writing, Nelson Mandela and Frederick de Klerk for peaceful termination of apartheid and introduction of democracy, Sidney Brenner for genetic regulation of organ development and programmed cell death, and Michael Levitt, who was born in South Africa, for accurate computer models of chemical reactions. So we have punched above our weight, and our thinkers, from Max Theiler to Michael Levitt, remind us that knowledge can change lives. But perhaps what truly defines us is our heritage, shaped by ancient peoples and ancient lands. Our landscape tells stories that span millennia. So in the next few slides, I have provided some cultural and natural wonders, all of which are UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Each slide has a map to show the province location of the heritage site, and I've also included a good video link where one can get more information on these sites. So let's start off in the Western Cape. Here is Robben Island, home of Nelson Mandela for 27 years, but which started off as a hospital for socially unacceptable groups and also acted as a military base. In the Free State province is the Vredefort Dome. This is the oldest, largest, deep eroded meteorite impact structure on Earth. It is estimated that a 6-mile meteor created a 186-mile crater about 2 billion years ago. The cradle of humankind in Gauteng province is a hominid fossil site that captures human evolution spanning 3.5 million years. Some of the major finds at this site include the Taung skull, Mrs. Pless, and Littlefoot, all belonging to Australopithecus africanus, dated to be about 2.8 million years old. And of course, Homo naledi, whose skeleton you can see here, an archaic human estimated to be about 300,000 years old. The Mapungubwe cultural landscape in Limpopo province is one of the oldest indigenous kingdoms in the country. Royal artifacts include the golden rhinoceros and also demonstrates the existence of an ancient but thriving trade with Asia. In the Mpumalanga province, the Barberton Makonjwa Mountains were one of the first land masses to rise out of the ocean, and these rocks have evidence of the oldest fossilized bacteria. Tom Cruise was in this vicinity not too long ago, filming his last installment of Mission Impossible, if you can recall the aeroplane scene. The Isimangaliso Wetland Park in the province where I am from, which is KwaZulu-Natal, comprises 5 natural interlinked systems: marine, coastal, wetland, estuarine, and terrestrial. It also has a very large biodiversity, but is also sadly the continent's last primary nesting site for leatherback and loggerhead turtles. Also in KwaZulu-Natal is the Maloti Drakensberg Park, a mountain range that stretches for 93 miles, contains many endangered bird species, and is also where one of the oldest cultures on Earth, the San people, lived for more than 4,000 years. Here is an example of their rock paintings. In the Richtersveld cultural and botanical landscape in the northern province, one would find the Nama people, or the Hottentots, as the early colonialists call them. They are a semi-nomadic group who coexist closely with nature, as do the San people, both of whom I will elaborate on, especially with how they used plants. In the Komani cultural landscape, the Komani San communities have links to tools and practices from the Stone Age. They have adapted to harsh desert conditions and are expert medicinal plant users. Many of these heritage sites are linked to the ways people lived with plants as food, medicine, and also spiritual symbols. These ecosystems and the people who stewarded them gave rise to a botanical richness that is truly unparalleled. In the following 2 slides, I will unpack some of this diversity. The succulent karoo in the Northern Cape province is one of 3 biodiversity hotspots in South Africa, containing the world's richest succulent flora with more than 6,000 species, 40% of which are endemic. Another biodiversity hotspot is the Cape Floral region with 13 protected areas spanning 2 provinces, the Eastern and Western Cape. It also has the fynbos vegetation, which is found nowhere else on Earth. What makes it even more special is that this region makes up only 0.5% of the area of Africa, but contains an astonishing 20% of the continent's flora. So, let's talk about Africa's flora a bit more. There are several biodiversity hotspots in the whole of Africa, as indicated by these red dots. But Africa hosts around 45,000 species over many biogeographical regions, but the southern part of the continent is disproportionately species-rich. South Africa alone contributes a staggering 2/3 of the whole continent's plant biodiversity, which is looked after by the South African National Biodiversity Institute. As mentioned before, there are 3 biodiversity hotspots in South Africa, namely the Cape Floral region in orange. This is one of the most species-rich per unit area anywhere on Earth. The succulent karoo in green, with more than 6,000 species, and the Maputoland Ponderland region in red, with more than 8,000 species. These areas also have very high levels of endemism. Next, I will unpack some of this diversity by highlighting a few of our most iconic plant families and species. The proteas are a large family of 1,500 species, with some indigenous to South Africa. It is a very special group to South Africans, and there are a whole lot of interesting facts about proteas. To name a few, it appears on some of our coins and important documents like birth certificates and passports. Protea cyrinoides, or the king protea, is our national flower, and I have used it as a slide background throughout this presentation. So I'm not sure if you picked that up. Although the main uses are ornamental, some local communities use proteas for traditional medicine, and to a lesser extent, the flowers are sometimes eaten as food in certain species. The aloes are a large group with more than 150 species in South Africa, many of them indigenous. This species is even mentioned in the Bible. The most widely used species in medicine is Aloe ferox and aloe vera. Food-wise, it is the leaf gel that is consumed. Agapanthus is an indigenous genus to South Africa. It's also known as the African lily, and it comprises only 7 species. It is used mainly in gardening and landscaping, and to some extent, the roots are used in traditional medicine and as food. The Erica genus is a type of fynbos. Fynbos is an Afrikaans word that means fine bush. The Erica family is quite large. It's got more than 8,000 species, and it is abundant in the Cape Floral region. However, some of them are quite rare, while the leaves of some are used in traditional medicine. The Strelitzia genus is quite small. There are only 5 species, all of which are indigenous to South Africa. Its stunning flower is called the bird of paradise, which appears also on one of our current coins. The flowers are mildly toxic, but they are still used in traditional medicine. I've also included on this slide a few notable mentions. This particular pelargonium is known as the parent of many modern hybrid pelargoniums. Elytropappus is a species that the rhinos rub against to relieve their skin irritations. Sapphinochilus is the critically endangered species that I'll be talking a little bit more about a bit later. This particular species is uprooted for its rhizomes. Diaspora, the world's most threatened yam, critically endangered. Basilia, this particular plant has a distinct coffee scent first thing in the morning. And Adansonia, this is a picture of our local baobab, which is more than 1,000 years old. It has a 47-meter circumference around the leaf canopy, and the trunk diameter has been estimated to be around 10 meters. So, South Africa's foodways are a mix of ancient knowledge and adaptive innovation. Let us take a historical look. South Africa has a multicultural population containing indigenous people and descendants of Europeans, Malaysians, and Indians. I am a 4th-generation Indian whose forefathers were brought to South Africa from India in 1860 to work as laborers on the sugarcane farms. We are commonly known as the Rainbow Nation, with 11 official languages and several tribes or ethnic groups listed here, and they make up 80% of the population. Of the various tribes, the oldest are the San or the Bushmen and the Nama, and together they make up about 1% of the South African population. They all descended from the Khoi or the Khoisan group. Here are examples of the San people, and an example of their rock painting, and an example of a Nama person and their desert dwellings. The San and Nama are the earliest humans of South Africa, and they lived a hunter-gatherer and nomadic lifestyle. They followed the seasons, looking for food plants, and were very careful not to overharvest. They also used a wide variety of plants as medicines, in addition to building homes and making jewelry. I've inserted a few video links, but unfortunately Zoom doesn't allow me to watch them with you, but please access these at your own convenience. When it comes to food plants, the San and Nama gathered 400 to 500 wild plant species, many of which are still eaten today. These include the mogongo nuts, fruit of the baobab, lots and lots of tubers, and melons. Believe it or not, this is what a typical breakfast looks like. Some plants consume raw, while others are cooked. So the early colonists learned about both nourishing and nurturing plants from these tribal communities and adopted some of these into their own cultures. And later, during the Bantu expansion from West Africa, the Bantu-speaking people migrated down to South Africa and brought agriculture and new crops and influenced the regions they settled in. The Bantu tribes also adopted Khoisan practices as deeper integration took place. Today, Bantu people represent a significant portion of South Africa's population, with major tribal and ethnic groups, as I spoke about on the previous slide. A lot of the plant wisdom traveled not only within Africa, but across oceans via the transatlantic slave trade. This occurred through storytelling and practice, which can be seen through plants with similar properties being used for the same purposes. These plants and practices form deep roots across the Americas and through the African diaspora. Most of the spread and knowledge originated from West Africa, with plants, many of them indigenous, arriving in the Americas over hundreds of years. These plants reached the Caribbean, Brazil, and the US Gullah communities. In these areas, the rural communities still use various plant parts for medicine, prescribed by the so-called root doctors. Bush and herbal teas are used as both medicine and food. It is not clear what the direct impact of South Africa is, as we were not a major source of the enslaved labor, but there are overlapping practices and even plant species. In South Africa, groups such as the Khoisan, the Zulu, and the Xhosa have long used plants like amaranthus and aloe as food, medicine, and for spiritual care, all of which are echoed in African diaspora communities across the Americas. Through both forced and voluntary migrations, several indigenous African species took root in the New World. And a few examples I've included on these slides. So we've got okra, baobab, Malabar spinach, Jew's mallow, and the spider plant. In a lot of cases, it's the leaves that are consumed. However, the fruit is also popular. And then I've got the roselle hibiscus on the side, cassava, and then the African eggplant. Limited leaf usage in these two species, but in the hibiscus, the calyces are used to make beverages. Here, it's mainly the tubers that are eaten, and in the African eggplant, both leaves and fruit are preferred. At the bottom, I have some examples of African-inspired cuisine in the Caribbean, in Brazil, and the Gullah community. Unfortunately, I don't know the names of these dishes, but maybe somebody in the audience can help us with that later. When it comes to commercialized African crops, there are 119 species. They are categorized into grains, vegetables, and fruit, some of which are shown here. 16 of these are indigenous to South Africa, and I would like to talk about two examples, marula and rooibos. Marula, or Sceroclaria virea, is a tree with fruit that has many purposes. In the culinary sense, marula fats and oils are extracted from the nuts and used as cooking fat. The fruit flesh is also used to make jams, preserves, and juice, and the very well-known amarula alcohol. In addition to food uses, oil extracts are also used in skincare and hair care. Besides a few countries in Africa that export marula products from South Africa, it also reaches the United States and Canada and many countries in Europe and the Asia Pacific. From a food perspective, rooibos leaves are used to primarily make a tea. Aspalathus linearis, or the rooibos plant, translated from Afrikaans to mean red bush, is grown in the Cape region to the tune of 20,000 tons annually. Of that, half is exported, and Japan buys the most at 30%, while the United States imports 4%. There are more than 30 countries spanning 4 continents that import rooibos. Rooibos extracts are also used in skin and other healthcare products for many purposes. I'm not sure if anyone in the audience recognizes this, but I pinched this off the Walmart site, and I believe this particular brand of rooibos tea is readily available in the United States. So it's not just culinary inputs that South Africa has had globally. Our plants also traveled as medicine. On this slide, I've got a few screenshots of a video, and it is of an old medicinal practice that shows a sand herbalist locating a special plant, digging it up, and then taking out its root to be used in traditional medicine. In the video, he goes on to explain how he pays nature back for the service the plant will provide. So give it a watch at the link. Today, traditional healers in South Africa, known as sangomas or inyangas, pictured here, are custodians of this botanical pharmacy. with 20,000 tons of plants traded annually. This knowledge is as relevant today as it ever was, and is estimated to be increasing at 15 to 25% every year. These medicines have a street value of 15 million US dollars. Let's revisit a few of these ancient plant allies and see how they are still used today. Many of the plants that the San and Nama used for thousands of years are being farmed, processed, and synthesized and commercialized today. Plants like Hoodia, or the Bushman's hat, particularly its stem pieces, were used to suppress hunger on the long hunts of the San and Nama people. Today, it is still used to suppress hunger, but rather for weight loss. Agathosma betulina, or buchu, the leaves of this particular plant were used as perfume for brides on their wedding occasions. Today, it has found use in urinary and digestive health. Canna, or Scaletium tortuosum leaves, were used to alleviate stress and enhance mood, with similar uses today, and more, such as anti-inflammatory and antioxidant. In other plants, aloe leaves and hypoxis, or the African potato corms, are used to treat cuts or used as nutrients respectively, and they are now being used as immune boosters, pain treatments, and to address excretory problems. Knowledge about the roots of the devil's claw, Harpagophytum procumbens, and the bulb scales of the century plant, Bopone distica, were used for pain and inflammation, and this has been passed down across generations. Here I have some well-known African medicinal plants. Too much to read. There's actually 5,000 of them. Of those, 3,000 grow in South Africa, and of those, 2,000 are indigenous. So those with a yellow star on this particular slide are the ones that have been commercialized locally, regionally, or internationally in wellness markets, from teas to oils. And I would like to talk briefly on two examples, aloe and buchu. Firstly, aloe is known as a pharmacy in a plant because of the myriad treatments it offers. One South African contribution from aloe is the ferox species, whose leaves are used to prepare health supplements, manage pain, and defy age, amongst others. Some of these products have reached the United States, South America, Europe, Asia, and is also marketed to other parts of Africa. Buchu is marketed globally for healthcare, particularly its essential oils extracted from the leaves. It is also known for a long list of health benefits as listed here. In Africa, Botswana is the biggest importer, while abroad it is exported to the United States, Europe, and the Asia Pacific. South African plants are no longer just indigenous secrets. From the four examples I discussed here, marula, rooibos, aloe, and buchu, one can appreciate that they are marketed globally as superfoods or healthcare staples, and perhaps often without full credit to their origins or stewards. I'd now like to share a glimpse into my own research, which is focused on bridging traditional knowledge with science. In South Africa, we have a group of plants known as the underutilized crops, which are most widely eaten in our poor rural communities. These plants are weedy, they are easy to grow, but are not really available commercially, most likely because they are considered to be poor man's food. The top four crops eaten are the amaranths, pictured here. Coincidentally, these are documented as having originated in Central America. The blackjack, pictured here, also originated in Central America, but has links to both the North and the South. Cleome, pictured here, indigenous to South Africa, and Cocorus, the origins are unknown, or not unknown, uncertain, but presumably both Africa and Asia have been linked to their origins. These crops are all cooked before consumption, as seen in these dishes. But although they are high in nutrients, they are overlooked from a commercial perspective. In South Africa, we have the double burden of over and undernutrition. Undernutrition includes deficiencies in certain vitamins and nutrients, such as iron and calcium. Because of their potential to address nutrient deficiencies, I work with students and local communities to study these plants' potential using biotechnological tools like tissue culture. However, one cannot just propagate weeds. Therefore, my research approach is as follows. We choose a particular underutilized crop species. If we have access to seeds, we germinate those seeds. The seedlings that are produced are screened and selected for their superior characteristics, their superior traits. So some of the screening tests we do are for nutrient content, and we also have students working on those that are showing tolerance to abiotic stresses. Once we have identified those elite genotypes, we then develop micropropagation protocols for them. If we have access to field plants, we also develop micropropagation protocols for those. And we take them down a conservation route as well, because if one has superior genotypes, one would want to conserve them. There are two approaches we use for conservation. One is through minimal growth, which is a type of approach used in micropropagation, and the other technique is cryopreservation. The plant families and some species within them have been the focus of our work for a number of years, and I've listed them here. The arrows indicate what aspects were investigated for each species. I want to draw your attention to the purple, which is for Celosia argentea, and this is an underutilized amaranth and my first case study for today. We studied all of these aspects, but I will only talk a little bit about micropropagation, nutrient content, and conservation. So let me simplify this slide for you, because these are results from the student who worked on this particular project. So tissue culture is about using a small piece of the plant called an explant and manipulating it using growth promoters added to a nutrient substrate to grow into multiple plants. From an explant to multiple plant, which we then call clones, that can survive in the natural environment, the whole process is referred to as micropropagation. So for Celosia, we developed micropropagation protocols using commercial growth promoters and compared their multiplication results from different culture systems. When we used the conventional semi-solid nutrient substrate culture system, we were only able to get 8 plants or clones from every original explant we started off with. However, when we moved on to larger scale production in 2 types of bioreactors, this is the bubble type over here, and this one down here is called the Rita bioreactors. They contain liquid substrate as opposed to a semi-solid substrate. And then these bioreactors, the difference between the two is that the explants that are in one of them is immersed continuously in the nutrient substrate, and in the second one, it is immersed temporarily. And what we found is that in these bioreactor systems, the yield, so how many plants or clones did we end up with after or from every explant that we started off with, increased quite significantly. That is reflected in this particular graph. So we went from 8 in semi-solid culture to between 10 and 60 using the bioreactors. The highest that we got was 60 plants from every X plant that was put in the bubble type bioreactor shown in this picture here. In addition, when we measured the biomasses, so how much of the actual weight or mass of the plants we ended up with from the bioreactors, we found that the bioreactor systems outperformed the semi-solid culture system. More importantly, we found that temporarily immersing those X plants in the bubble type bioreactors also resulted in the highest magnesium, calcium, phosphorus, and zinc contents in the resulting clones. This study further showed that the recommended dietary allowances, as guided by the World Health Organization and indicated by the blue lines, were met for magnesium, calcium, iron, and zinc in plants from all the bioreactors tested, while the same was true for phosphorus in the bubble type bioreactor only. This paper was recently accepted for publication. Celosia is fast-growing, it's rich in nutrients, and it is adaptable to varied environments, such as those found in our rural communities. Through micropropagation, our work has shown that we can multiply it efficiently, opening the doors for large-scale cultivation and community health interventions. But not all plants are easily propagated, especially those medicinal species threatened by overharvesting. So moving on from underutilized food plants to overutilized medicinal plants, species like the African ginger, the black stinkwood, and the pepperbark tree, all illustrated in these diagrams. These plants are being pushed to the edge. Ginger rhizomes are obtained through destructive uprooting, while the bark of these trees are also harvested in a negative manner. These are all slow-growing species, and one can see their conservation statuses here in red: critically endangered, endangered, vulnerable. But how are these determined? Like malnutrition affecting people in South Africa, there are also numerous threats to our plants, as can be seen in this list. The South African National Biodiversity Institute has emphasized areas of highest conservation concern in these red zones. And I wonder if you can see that they correspond to those 3 biodiversity hotspots I spoke about at the start. SANBI assesses and documents threatened species in various conservation categories, from declining to near threatened and vulnerable to critically endangered. Sadly, more than 6,000, if we total these orange and red categories, more than 6,000 species have threatened statuses in South Africa, with the Western Cape province, where the Cape Floral region is, being the most vulnerable, highest number of threatened species. So it's data like this that inspired us to work on regenerating critically endangered species, like the African ginger, which I'll now talk about as a second case study. African ginger is derived from the rhizomes of Staphylococcus aethiopicus. This species is extinct in most of its former range, and all indications are that harvesting is unsustainable. The rhizomes are chewed fresh to treat asthma, colds, coughs, and the flu. The species is slow growing and the rhizomes are dormant for many months. Each rhizome gives 1 to 2 buds, which produces only 1 plant per bud, as we've illustrated here. However, through careful lab-based propagation, we have shown in our work that even dormant rhizomes can yield multiple new plants under the right conditions, all of which are listed here. And this was actually published in a paper earlier this year. I've got a picture on the next slide to represent this more simplistically. But to summarize here, we used micropropagation to improve plant production to 13 plants for every bud harvested. So this was the image I was referring to. So we removed rhizomes from the donated plants. We excised the axillary buds. We then put them into in vitro culture and multiplied the shoots, and then eventually rooted them into full clonal plants. For both the species that I have spoken about, Celosia and the wild ginger, we went a step further by developing protocols for their long-term conservation. We used cryopreservation, which involves these major steps. But in a nutshell, this is a technique in which plant material is suitably prepped for cooling in liquid nitrogen, which freezes the tissues in time. We were able to do that and successfully recover and regenerate these tissues for both species. This particular slide illustrates the tissues and the steps for cryopreservation of wild ginger. And this slide shows the protocol for Celosia. So these techniques give hope for conservation of desired genotypes and threatened species, but it must be paired with sustainable use and community education. Work on other species is ongoing. As we close, I'd like to leave you with some final reflections. South Africa's plants tell stories of healing, resilience, survival, and connection. They bridge past and present, science and tradition, local and global. My work is just a small part of a larger call to protect these treasures, elevate overlooked crops, and honor the communities who have discovered them and kept them alive. But we cannot do it alone. It takes researchers, policymakers, libraries, museums, and exhibitions like this one to remember, protect, and reimagine our botanical future. We have a concept in South Africa called Ubuntu, which means I am because we are. Even Tom Cruise learned about it when he was here, which you can watch at this clip. Despite us living in what is currently a very broken world, our health and future are shared. So may we walk forward together. My image references, and I'd like to extend sincere acknowledgements to the following people: Dr. Valerie Pence for approaching me to give this talk, Emily Little for general information, meeting me behind the scenes, and the technical help, the Lloyd Library and Museum for this opportunity, my university for hosting the research, my industry partners and donors, my funders, my postgraduate students, particularly recent doctoral graduates, Dr. Chandika Ramlal and Dr. Vilosh Reddy, whose work I highlighted today. I'm now open to your thoughts, reflections, or questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for an absolutely fascinating talk and also for the important work that you do. I know that I'm going to be rewatching this video that will be on our YouTube channel because there's so much and so much rich information. I also appreciated the information you gave us about South Africa. If you haven't been there, anybody in the audience or myself or parts of the region, there's definitely places you've enticed me to want to explore. It also is lunchtime in Cincinnati, so your talk made me hungry at certain points. And I very much wanted to thank you for your use of maps to help us orient and understand what you were talking about. That really helped me a lot. I thought your final thoughts were so valuable, and something that is, I believe, in sync with them is that throughout the course of our exhibition here, a theme that kept coming through, and I thought about it during your lecture as well, is that we can't understand plants and their uses without understanding the people that interact with them. So I very much appreciated that. Um, a couple of questions for me came up when I was watching. There was a slide where you showed there were a group of women that had white tops on and dark skirts. Um, I'm sorry to get, and I was just curious who those women were. Are they healers? What sort of
Yeah.
role did they play in this process?
Yes. So the local vernacular terminologies for what they are called are sangomas or inyangas. And I'm not sure if you want me to project that slide again, I can, but I'm looking at it on the side here. So yes, that would be one of our local healers. And there was a group of women as well, yes, with the black skirts and the tops, the white tops. They are known as the traditional healers. So they ordinarily would be the so-called rural doctors that our populations that live out don't have access to hospitals, etc. So your conventional Western medicine, they would visit these particular healers as a first port of call for primary healthcare. And there's an astounding, I think, 75 to 80% of the rural population in our country visit these healers first before going elsewhere for medicinal advice.
So my father was in a rural area in South Africa and got sick, and the only medical care that was available to him was through a healer. He was very impressed.
Wow.
It's like, I wish they had that over here. So one of the things that you talked about is some of the treatments or medicinal uses for some of the plants and how they have spread outside of Africa and are used around the world. Um, but I'm wondering, or I should say, and I'm wondering, in South Africa, are the people that are non-indigenous, of European, Indian, other descents, are they embracing largely these same medicinal routes that the indigenous people are? Are they slower to um, sort of glom onto that, I guess you would say?
To give you an honest answer to that, I think they're much slower. I think it's also if you live in close proximity to those rural communities, then you're more likely to bump into a sangoma or know somebody who lives in those communities and possibly reach out to them. But from my personal perception and the people that I know and talk to, and just kind of judging from my own eye, with my own eye, and hearing the talk, I think that our descendants from the so-called colonialists that arrived here and the laborers that arrived here, they would shy away. But that's not taking away. So, for example, in the Indian community, our forefathers also brought a lot of that traditional knowledge to South Africa with them. So I, for example, developed a love for medicinal plants when my mom actually gave me some leaves from our garden when I was a little girl to heal a sore throat. And that's where it all started for me. So there's a lot of common practice. And I don't want to, lead you the wrong way and say that people outside of those tribal communities are not doing it, because they probably are. But I think my first possible perception of that is that they would go for the Western medicine first and foremost. Yeah.
I was also struck when you were talking about some plants that could address um, vitamin deficiencies in the malnourished. And I found it interesting because I am not experiencing food scarcity. I believe that I eat a very healthy diet. And at one time or another time in my life, I have been diagnosed with almost every one of those deficiencies. So I am vegetarian, so maybe that accounts for the iron. Um, But I just found it very interesting that it is something that obviously would have appeal for those that are experiencing malnutrition, but also for anyone that is eating a modern diet, perhaps, or maybe you could have, maybe there's more you would want to say about, why somebody that, you know, is not experiencing food deficiency could still benefit from these plans.
Oh, so you mean the people who could possibly eat those plants even if they don't have the deficiencies? Yeah, I mean, personally, me, I'd like to think I'm pretty healthy, but if I had to look at the amaranths in particular, this is something that my mom, again, I'm speaking about my mom a lot. She used to make amaranth. We in Hindi call it bhaji. So she used to make that a lot for us, and it's actually quite delicious. So if you develop a palate for these leafy vegetables, so to speak, then one can, just derive the dual benefit of enjoying what you eat and also ingesting those inadvertently, ingesting those nutrients as well. So no, 100%. Maybe a lot of people don't do it out of choice because in the poor rural communities, this is what they have access to. These plants are quite easy to grow, but they, if they illiterate or may not even know that these plants are actually good for them. And we find that, I think, in our rural communities, I personally think that the residents, the people that live in those communities, are a lot more healthy and a lot stronger and have a lot more endurance than people that live in like a more westernized type of lifestyle and eat a more westernized type of diet.
And that's another theme that we've heard over
Yeah.
and again throughout this whole series as well. You talked about underutilized plants that did have the possibilities for large scale cultivation. And you just mentioned developing a palate. Is that one of the challenges, or are there other challenges maybe not covered by that list of obstacles to moving to larger scale cultivation for the underutilized beneficial plants?
I think there are a lot of reasons for why that has not taken off. So, those agricultural crops that I mentioned earlier, like the teffs and the bananas and the wheat and the sorghum, those things are all well established in mainstream agriculture. But when it comes to these particular underutilized orphan crops, there needs to be a lot more effort put into education, awareness, the health benefits. So in the last 10 to 15 years, I would say that from a research perspective, they really have reached, even the international arena. People in Europe, Asia are all collaborating with their counterparts in the African continent because locally here we have access to those crops, etc. But I think there is slowly the mindset is changing. There's starting to become a little bit more of a buy-in. Myself, I was very healthily funded by our local government to do this kind of work over a 9-year period. But sadly, even from the funding side, the money's drying up, and I think this is true for everywhere because of the economic climate that we're in. But I think it's multifaceted, the reasons for why this has not taken off. And it's sad because there are a lot of opportunities for like the custodians of these particular plants to find jobs. I mean, it's really the women folk who know these plants, source these plants, collect these plants, cook these plants, and feed their families with these plants. And if we can get people like that into some value chain systems, it creates opportunities for employment, healthier eating, etc., etc. So, yeah, the buy-in has not been that great. These plants are considered to be poor man's food. But there are also, some really good organizations that are addressing those kinds of stereotypes. So, for example, the African Orphan Crops Consortium, they have a fully fledged website where they've got a list of 100 plants, so-called underutilized plants that they are focusing on for sequencing their genomes and giving funding for people to research and look for all the goodness in these materials. So the landscape is changing, but maybe not fast enough. But it's people like us on the ground that need to bring out the information into the open so that one can appreciate the value and also keep these traditions alive as well. Because for me, I think that's critical. Use what we know. The beauty of the knowledge that's handed down from generation to generation is critical.
Well, Shakira, thank you so much again for your valuable work, your information that you provided us. Oh, we have a question. Let's see, in the chat. Well, I might have lost it.
I can see the question. Shall I read it out? Okay. So Dr. Shaik stated that Dr. Shaik stated that people on the rural communities who are likely to live on the traditional diets are likely to be healthy. Does Dr. Shaik have any data on their longevity? I don't, but maybe that's something I can look into if there's anything in the literature, and I can send that Emily's way for circulation. I'm very happy to look into that. This is just, like I said, my own perception. I did not read about that before the talk, so I don't have a solid, like a literature-based answer for you, but very happy to follow up. Sorry.
Thank you for that question. Before we close, are there any other questions from the audience? Well, again, I would like to thank you for your valuable information, your important work. And I also want to say what I found to be your very hopeful message. So that was very inspiring. I'd also like to thank the audience and let all of you know that this presentation will be available on our YouTube channels. And if you want to see our other lectures in this African plant diaspora series, they are already up. And we will email the folks that are registered for this class. We'll certainly let you know, of course, Dr. Shaik, and when it's up. And we hope you view it and share it. I do want to point out that programs like this are supported in part by the Lloyd Library and Museum members. And I know that there's at least one member in the audience. So if you're a member, thank you. If you're not, I encourage you to join. And we hope to see you next time. Thank you. Good day.
Thank you very much.